Hello all, and welcome to another Lakelight Conversation. I'm Harold Smith, the interim president of the Lakelight Institute. And today, I'm thrilled to have with us not only a best-selling author of over 40 titles, but someone who is one of my dearest friends, Steven R. Lawhead. And Steve, I got to tell you, from this point on, you're not Steven, okay? You're going to be Steve,
I'll be Steve,
or Steve,
yeah,
Steve-O, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, welcome. And for those of you who might not know of Steve Lawhead, again, he's a novelist who works largely in the area of historical fantasy and myth. He has, in fact, helped millions of readers. In fact, I think the estimate is you've sold between 2 and 3 million copies of your works. He's helped millions of readers reimagine such legendary stories as King Arthur and Robin Hood by placing these heroes in the context of real places, real kingdoms, and real history. And right now, the streaming series Rise of the Merlin, based on your retelling of the Arthurian legend in the Pendragon cycle, is being shown on the Daily Wire. And obviously, we're going to get back to that later in the podcast. But let me just say, in the midst of all of this success, again, Steve's a friend. I've known you for almost 50 years. So I've known you before all of this.
Well, in 50 years, what'd you get for our anniversary? What did you get me?
Yeah, I'll buy another book. But I mean, obviously, I knew you when.
Yeah.
I knew you when you were an editor at Campus Life magazine. You were a manager of the rock band DeGarmo and Key.
That's right.
And briefly, a rock critic. And as I also recall, this is when we were young, you were my always victim when we played tennis. In fact, did you ever beat me in tennis?
Probably not. It was always very close game.
Yeah.
You managed to pull it out at the end.
Clearly your memory is fading. But anyway, obviously, you and Alice, you've been married for over 50 years.
Yeah.
And Judy and I have been married over 50 years. And by God's grace, we were able to connect at a church. Judy and I had just moved to the Chicago area, and we were looking for a church and attended this one church. And right after the service, your wife Alice came up to you. You didn't, but your wife Alice came,
that would be right.
came up to us and invited us over to your apartment. I don't know if you remember this, your apartment for cake and coffee. And it happened to be chocolate zucchini cake, which was your favorite cake. And as you shared with me later, you were actually upset that she shared that cake with us because you wanted all the cake.
Well, no, there was the fact that you took the whole cake with you when you left. No, that sounds about right. And in my memory, it was just that of all the churches in the Wheaton area, you walk into our church. And I've been there ever since.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what can I say? But anyway, so Steve, it's been a great friendship over these years. Of course, now you and Alice live in Iffley, England, and that's just outside of Oxford, right?
Yeah, well, in the greater Oxford area,
yeah. And yet we've sought, as obviously evidenced by you being here today, we've tried to stay in touch with each other, not only via email, but just, you coming over here or us going over there.
Yeah.
And it's been a precious friendship, and it takes me back to those early years when we kind of not only were in each other's apartments sharing meals, but sharing dreams as well. So it's wonderful to see how God has worked in all 4 of our lives and the way in which he has moved you in really a profound way in terms of your literary success.
Well, I give him all the glory. Really, the intention was just, as I see it, is always just to be a writer.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, I think I learned very early on, a person can only write out of who they are. Mm-hmm. And for me, as a believer, that allows great latitude of opportunity for storytelling because I can obviously write about belief and non-belief and all, every shade in between for use in stories. And someone, I imagine, who is not a believer, it will bump up against certain limits, to their ability to do that.
Yeah. So, okay, so how have you, I mean, there are other questions I want to ask actually before this, but since you mentioned faith, obviously it plays a role in all of your work. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it does. I don't want to get tangled up in the deep weeds, but the faith element is that part of the human existence is faith-based in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so to write, truthfully about that would include that element.
Yeah.
To leave it out leaves out a whole area. Now, the books are not about that. They may be about many other different things, but that is one element that, goes toward making up, what a human being is. And like I say, get quickly into the philosophical, but to me, the artistic endeavor is to be about goodness, beauty, and truth. Mm-hmm. And so every story, I'm either trying to elucidate one of those aspects or all of them, and the source of goodness only comes from one place, that is from God. Yeah. And whether anyone acknowledges that or not, that is so.
That's great. That's great. Well, Steve, I really want to kind of go back to that theme in a minute, but just kind of looking back. Now you live in Ifley, but I mean, you were born and raised in Nebraska, right?
In Kearney, Nebraska, right in the middle of the United States.
So I think of Kearney, and it's not. Hopefully, this is not offensive. It doesn't strike me as the land of legend and myth.
No, go Big Red.
Yeah, I know, Nebraska football, so it raises in my mind the question. So. When did the whole idea of writing hit you? Was it when you were a little boy, when you were in junior high, when you were in high school? How did it come about? And what were your influences? What were you reading?
Well, you've asked many questions there. Yeah. And if my mother was sitting here, she would tell you that I was always telling stories to my brothers and sisters, made up things and whatnot. And all through high school and everything, any chance of an essay or something, I just put on something. And I really only ever got encouragement in high school from one English teacher who liked what I wrote and always graded me pretty highly. But she encouraged me. Just keep writing. And she was the only one for a long time that did that. But that was always in the cards. I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to write about these kind of mythic heroes that I grew up with. But I knew I would have to have a lot more, more chops, to be able to carry it off well.
So I mean, who did you read?
Well, everybody that you had to read in school. I mean, we read Tom Sawyer, which I liked a lot. Read all of Twain and the old standards, Steinbeck and Willa Cather and all that. Right. And some I got along with, some I didn't so much. But then in college, I discovered Ian Fleming and James Bond were just coming out at the time. So I devoured all those. And I think any time you're a writer, little bits of what you read stick. Uh-huh. And if you ask anybody, some of the sentence structure in some of these books kind of mirrors a Fleming type sentence structure. He's very, very good with action, very, very good at being concise and moving a story ahead. And so I haven't got any spies or spy thrillers or anything like that. Those kind of, mechanical things you pick up and just absorb.
Right. So you went to college. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to University of Nebraska at Kearney.
Okay. Yeah. So did you study English literature? Or what did you study?
No, well, as back in those days, you did have to have a core subject was English, but I didn't pursue it beyond that because I saw what was happening in the literature classes, and I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually got a gig, just offhand, writing for the college newspaper, and they decided they would do a column, and I could just write this humorous column about campus life, and what was going on. It was kind of a satire thing. I learned later. I mean, a year or two later, after I was done doing it, it was only a couple of years, and then you graduate. But the English department was using those articles as to teach satire.
Oh, really?
Because it was relevant to the students and the campus, and so they thought that was a good intro into it. And I thought, okay, yeah, but yeah. So there, but that was it, But knowing that I wanted to be a writer, but I needed to have some kind of grist for the mill, so to speak. I did accept an invitation to Northern Baptist Seminary, and that would have been just before we met. And I spent 2 years there, not studying preaching or ministry, but theology and biblical history was that. But one of the great benefits of being in that seminary was that you could take classes in any other graduate school in the area and have it add to your studies. And so I took a writing course being taught by Harold Myra. And because he was at Campus Life magazine. And after class one night, and you submit papers and essays and things, he asked if I wanted to join the staff. And so
Life.
Campus Life. I knew those things, those kind of jobs did not come along, every day. So I abandoned the theological studies with just a few hours left to go to graduate, and went to work at Campus Life.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you who may not know, Campus Life, I don't think Campus Life is.
I think it probably is no more.
Yeah. It was a publication for Christian teens and early 20-somethings.
Yeah, it was a part of the Youth for Christ.
Right.
This was the publication arm of Youth for Christ.
Right.
And they were loosely connected, but we were and it was a 4-color glossy that came out once a month. And I think most every college and campus in the country had at least a copy knocking around the library, but we sell subscriptions and whatnot. So it was fun to buy subscription.
Right, and eventually it came over to Christianity Today, and that's where I engaged with Campus Life and Harold Myra, who was the president of Christianity Today at the time.
And probably I got my job because Harold Myra knew he was already leaving to take that job, and so that left a space on the low part of the totem pole. So
how did your time at Campus Life? I mean, obviously that further built our friendship. You were at Campus Life. The building was here. I was at the National Association of Evangelicals right next door.
Right next door.
And I was significantly younger at the time of just about anybody at the NAE.
Oh, yeah.
So I would wander over to Campus Life staff every noontime to share lunch with you guys. And so you and I connected, and the team there I connected with. Very vibrant, very creative atmosphere. So, I mean, obviously that had to contribute to your desire to write.
But it was yes, it did, but it was being assigned to write things you wouldn't normally write about, and having to do it well. But then also have your work critiqued by 2 other editors ahead of you that would say, okay, this has got to go that way, move this part up here, and you learn how to manipulate a piece to make it sing. And it used to drive me kind of nuts. You get it just perfect, word perfect, in your article, and then the art director would come in and say, "We got to. It's taking up too much space. We need to cut 3 inches." I said, "Well, that's great because that's how I write it by the inch, and so then you go back through and you find, okay, you can take out this line, you can move this, and you get those 3 inches so you can go in the magazine like that. But it's good training for anything else you want to do in writing.
Yeah. Well, obviously you're speaking to a lifelong editor, so you're singing my song. So while you were at Campus Life, I think, maybe I'm mixing up the timing here, your first book was published, Rock Reconsidered. Is that?
Yeah, that book grew out of the Campus Life magazine because I had started at the magazine as an editor. I started a music review column, and at the time, I know this sounds like the dark ages, but Christian music was just beginning to find its feet. And I mean that by, Christian rock and praise music and everything was just beginning to have liftoff in my imagination. And so I said, we have to start writing a record review column. And so I would do that, but we would review whatever was hot. I mean, Billy Joel or whatever was going on. And we would obviously then get letters about that. How can you praise this group called, Jesus People USA or Daniel Amos or something like that? They have drums in it, and don't you know drums are the devil? And so this was a reaction of against that, and say, I mean, people like Larry Norman were doing what back then we would call secular music, but with a Christian theme and message, And he was having all kinds of trouble about that too. So, and I think even one wrote a book called "Why Should the Devil Have All the Good Music?" And so that was a reaction against that. And so we distilled some of the articles and some of those kind of complaints and made a little kind of more of a glorified pamphlet out of it, Rock Reconsidered, and how you can consider using that art form, for good.
So what's interesting about that, and again, we could go down that rabbit trail, was shortly after Campus Life, you kind of envisioned a record company, kind of doing your own thing in that regard. And I remember we were going to go in together, but I decided not to do it.
Harold said, "This is a doomed enterprise." Thanks, but no
Our
thanks.
friendship held, though.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, and of course, unfortunately, you did have to shut it down.
Yeah.
But that actually was kind of is it safe to say, a pivot point for you in terms of your writing? I mean, I remember Alice, your wife, saying, yeah, that was the point that I decided to lock Steve in his office and tell him he would not be unlocked until he walked out with a manuscript.
Well, I did realize in that process that I wasn't cut out to be a music mogul, and that writing, it was taking me further away from that. And I could, even during those days, I could spend hours in my office, working on something, writing something, and so. When I decided to pull the plug on Ariel Records, it was just a case of going home and the next day rolling a piece of paper in the typewriter and starting a book. And a little known secret is I actually started 2 books, and
Really?
I'd write one 2 or 3 hours in the morning and one 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, and then decided whichever one got liftoff, I would go with that. And that one that got liftoff was called "In the Hall of the Dragon King." And so I set the other one aside, went with that, and we finished it up, brought it up here to Chicago to some publishers I knew that were beginning to think about this kind of fiction for a religious audience, and presented it at several different places.
And it was published.
It was published, Crossway Books.
So it is interesting. I mean, the genre, at the time you were marketing that book, basically, there was really not a lot.
There wasn't a lot.
You had some of the works, obviously, of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, but... I say but, all that is true, and that was how I thought a story should be. A story is a story. It's not a preachment. It's not a sermon written up as a story. It's none of those things. If it's going to live, it has to have its own life and live out of itself. And you want something, and like I said, about the goodness, beauty, and truth. So to elucidate or to, but fiction can do so much more than it's often asked to do. It can inspire, it can ennoble, it can lift up a spirit, it can encourage. So to be able to do that and have the freedom to do that
was granted by people like Crossway Books who got the idea, say, okay, we don't have to, make it this a preachment. It can live out of itself.
Study notes at the end.
But yeah, exactly. But it can live out of itself.
Right.
And if it has a life, it will go on.
Yeah.
And it does. It's in 35 languages and all around the world, that book. Yeah.
So let me just go back. You said you started in 2 books.
Yeah.
And you were looking for the one that had liftoff.
Yeah.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, like I said, to me, as a writer, I don't force a story to go where it doesn't want to go. I don't do not begin with a preconceived notion of where I want to end up. It's a process I call inventing, discovering. So I invent the world or the circumstances in which this story will take place, and whatever conflict that exists even before the story may begin, before I begin telling it. But then, having done that, I sit back and just see where it wants to go, and then so I'm inventing it, but I'm also discovering what's possible in this situation, that situation, or given this character or that character, what could happen, what needs to happen.
Yeah.
I pay attention to that, but I try not to get in the way of it.
Yeah.
And often, not often, once or twice in my career, got up toward the end of the book, and I thought, okay, this is going to be the ending. I'll do that, and it happened. It happened with Taliesin, the first of the King Arthur books. Is that I got toward the end, and I worked toward that scene at the end. I knew it had to be there, and it just stopped. And so next day, I'll try again. I approach it and then just hit a brick wall. Each time I came up to that, throw that away. We'll try this. It didn't work. Finally, after a few days of this, I just put aside, what really needs to happen here? And I wrote it. But I finished the whole book like in one day in, this what would normally take a week. And as my wife remembers it, I came stumbling downstairs and say, "You'll never guess who died." And because that was what needed to be told in the story. But I was getting in the way of my own, creation.
So you don't like work from an outline, like we start here, we end here.
No. I liken it to an explorer setting out for the North Pole. If I set out from Chicago, all I know is I need to keep moving north. I won't know every hill or valley or town or river I have to cross to get there. But if I keep moving north, I will eventually reach the North Pole.
Right.
And so having conceived of the North Pole of whatever shape that is, and move that direction.
Yeah. This just brings back a lot of memories because I remember one of our visits to England. I forget, if it was Dragon King or what you were working on at the time, but you would talk to me about these characters and, and basically saying, I don't know where they're going to be going. And yet you didn't necessarily even put it in the context of the book you were working on. You were just talking about these characters. And I remember periodically listening to you thinking, Steve, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
Is this the real world or is this Lawhead world?
Well, to me, as a writer, they all have a life. And sometimes, even after you close the cover of the book, the story's over. But that story goes on. The life they have, if they've lived at all in the pages, goes on. And so you can imagine more of what they might be doing, And I think that's kind of my job is to take words on paper, but to bring it to life in the mind of the reader, and make these characters live. And sometimes they just announce themselves; they're going to be in the book. I remember in the book Byzantium, I had a bit part for I needed a Viking chieftain, Harold Borwar. And he was going to come on and just be a captain of the ship, and it was going to deliver some people someplace they needed to be. But he refused to go away. He came on and did that, but then he was in the rest of the whole book, because they kept finding things for him to do, and it just made sense for that character to be in the book. And in the second book of the King Raven series, the Scarlet, it came to me as a voice. This is where the book starts. It starts with a voice, One day soon they're going to hang me for a dog, and so I said, wow, that. The character's all there. what else has got to say, and just follow that through. Yeah.
So so the characters live on. So does that explain why most of your books are? It's either a trilogy or a series of books. I mean, Pendragon has something like 7 books.
Yeah.
In the series, is that part of the characters living on? You get to the end of book 1 and you think, wait a minute, I think they're still alive. There's still more story to tell. Why?
No. Well, some of it's by design. Some of it's by necessity.
Yeah.
And it's not always clear which of those comes first.
Yeah.
But I think also the genre, the commercial fantasy genre as it is, and historical fantasy, almost demands a trilogy. If you've got something to say, readers almost demand to have a 3-book series. And so it's not original with me, but I picked up on that early on, that is a convention of the genre that you can work into.
Yeah. So,
in fact, sometimes the publisher likes that. I mean, Byzantium itself, if the publisher had that way, it would have been a trilogy. But I said, no, it's one story of one pilgrimage. It has to be in one book. We want the whole journey in one book.
Big book.
One big book, not broken up into sections, So, but although, like I said, publishing decisions in Germany, they do the edition, it's in 2. Many places are in 2. It's just,
so let's talk about Pendragon Cycle. I mean, obviously, that's the series that has been given. I don't want to say renewed life, because obviously it continues to sell, but with Rise of the Merlin, the streaming series on Daily Wire. So it's a retelling, am I correct here? The retelling of the Arthurian legend. So for those of you who have not perhaps read your books, or certainly have not read any of the Pendragon Cycle, just can you give us a quick, I hate to say, how do you do a synopsis of 7 books, but maybe the book Pendragon or kind of a synopsis, retelling the Arthur legend? How many times has that legend been told?
Probably more times than we either of us know about. But, since the earliest days, I mean, early medieval time, it was big stuff. And it just has continued. And each age puts it in its own context and brings out whatever themes are relevant to that age. But and it was one, like I said, from a very early age I wanted to write, but felt I needed to have more of the mechanics of writing down to be able to even approach it. So I put it off for a long time. But when I finally got ready to do it and launched into it, I quickly decided there's just way too much information. And so I also had another idea that as I've said sometimes, legends have legs. And if they're born someplace, but they get up and they move around, and they sometimes travel far distance from where they began. So the idea was to return it to the place it might have actually begun. What was the real age of Arthur? And luckily, there are people who at the time were beginning to write about that, post-Roman Britain, and so to return it there. And then the next big decision I made was to set aside everything medieval and French and of other, source material, and go back to whatever original source material there would be. And that led me to post-Roman Britain, but mostly Wales and the Welsh. And there are reasons for that we won't go into, but so that actually, kind of cleared the deck and gave me at the time, I was not aware that anybody else had done that, and maybe they still haven't. But to return it to that particular time, just between late 400s, early 500s, when it has now been dubbed by one historian the Age of Arthur. So that just gave me a very clean and big canvas to work from.
Right.
And if I needed anything for the mythic part, I could go back to the myths that later medieval trappings and try to, bring some of those in. But then by that time, they'd be in the context of the historical framework. And I did the same with Robin Hood, because I learned very quickly he could not have been in Nottingham. The forest, Sherwood Forest in Nottingham. That could in his day that is being told, that would not have been possible. No.
Okay, so obviously listening to you, there's a lot of research that goes into these books.
Yeah, well, there is a bit.
Yeah.
Well, and then that necessitated the whole move to England.
I was just going to say.
Because that's where they keep it all, and so to have access, I think I once estimated over the years every single place in the book I have been to, and if not the actual place, at least the place that would have looked like that place at that time, So you can, and luckily there are still all throughout England Roman ruins still. I mean, even in Oxfordshire, there's an ancient Roman villa, and there's several other Roman structures that you can go and visit, and you get a very, very good idea. But then you go to Wales and you see Mount Snowdon in the book. It's called Erytha, and it's just to sit there for a little while and look at the mountain, watch the clouds go across. You get much more of the atmosphere and what that countryside is like. Or you go to an ancient battlefield. You say, okay, I see how that is. The creek is here in the battleground. That's where and the forest is here. And so you get all that place material that just feeds into the books as background, but because it's real to me, it becomes real to the reader too, I hope, and my ability to describe it perhaps is such that it can make it a picture in the mind that is authentic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just listening to you, Steve-O, and I mean, all of the research, and then of course it's back to your house, back to the computer, and starting to take everything that you've sort of breathed in, watched, imagined, and start putting it down in pixels. So what does a normal day look like for you? Is there a normal day?
Well, no, there is. Oh, yeah, loads of them. You have to, because you're more or less chained to the desk for the duration. But to me, it isn't work. That's really just, it's just a delight. It's just my joy. It's my happy place to go and start and dig into that book and say, okay, now we're in chapter 15. Okay, what comes next? And then you discover what comes next, and you add that and just build it. But once a book maybe is under contract and you say, okay, it's due May 27th or whatever it is, then you say, okay, I've got this many days and the book needs to be about this long. You kind of put out there a number and aim for it. And just divide up the number of days by the number of words you need to reach that goal. And I used to keep track, every day, this many words. And if I fall behind a little bit one day, then catch up the next day. But just try to keep it going day by day. And you get there at the end. And that's pretty much what it's still like. Although this last book was written without a deadline hangover, but I kind of imposed one on myself to make.
What do you mean? Which last book?
Oh, the latest book is a Scottish adventure story that I'm writing with my son Ross, because he actually lives in Scotland and can provide lots of local detail that would be fun. So we're working on it together. But that is a typical day, and I'll work pretty much starting mid-morning, work through into mid-afternoon, late afternoon.
Yeah.
And whatever, if I get the number of words for the day early, I can quit and go and play. Or mow the lawn mostly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you referenced, if a book's under contract. So you've been doing this for, 40-some years, 40-some years. And, publishing has changed.
Oh, it's changed.
We'll get back to Pendragon, but I'm going down a side road. Publishing has changed. How has that change been reflected in how you've kind of navigated, the securing contracts for your books?
Well, luckily it's not up to me, because very, very early on, I've had the benefit of good agents. And the last one I had been with me for the last 35 years, I think. And he's still with me, and he's presenting the new book, and even now. And he navigates that landscape. I present the book, and I have noticed, among other things, that the things that affect me as a writer is that there's a little less editing going on of the hard copy these days, and I think that's a detriment to the writers. They could probably use it.
Yeah.
I know I depend on it. Where an editor says, this scene isn't working, let's see what you can do here. And those kind of things are helpful, help the book. But there's a bit less of that, I think, because publishers have less depth of staff in-house to be able to do that and everything. But having become somewhat established, back in the day, my material is more, and I also know how to adapt for what a publisher might be looking for a little bit better than just guessing. So.
Wow. Okay. So back to Pendragon. I do want to talk about the streaming series, but I did, Steve, knowing that we were going to do this podcast, I looked up some critiques of your Pendragon series, and no, I mean, come on, man, you're a friend. I was, these are good, bro. But no, I these two just leapt out at me, and this is from Publishers Weekly. It was about Pendragon, and I'm quoting here: "The Lawhead brilliantly creates an authentic and vivid Arthurian Britain. He never forsakes the sense of wonder that has graced the legend throughout the ages." That's nice.
Well, it is nice. I'm glad they got it, because that was one of the briefs I gave myself. What was to do this, but not to lose the magic, the thing that made it live.
And then the Library Journal wrote this about Pendragon. Again, I'm quoting, that it is reminiscent of C.S. Lewis, highly recommended. So that's high praise.
Yeah. Well, from Library Journal, that,
So, all right. So right now, the series, Pendragon series, has been made into a streaming series on the Daily Wire. How did that all come about? I mean, how does a book, and again, Pendragon, you're still adding to it, but the initial works were done 30 years ago, something like that. So how? What's the process of moving from hard copy to video to film?
Yeah. Well, luckily, that's nothing I have to get involved in. and it is really true, because the worlds are so different, and the needs and demands of one industry, the video industry, are so different than the writing of a story, that it's probably best if I didn't get involved in any level, and I wasn't. But it came to me, as many of these things do, just over the wires. My agent called up and said, "Hey, there's these guys want to do a movie of your book. What do you think?" And I asked, well, who are they and what's it about? And so I actually looked them up, and I saw these two chaps, one who turned out to be the director and one who turned out to be the producer of the series, saying that they, wanted to make this series, but they were willing to work with anyone who would work with them to do it. I said, okay, let's do it. And the director did promise me, when later on in the process came to see me in Oxford, saying, my goal is to maintain the authenticity and the integrity of the books. And the mantra he gave to his writers, I wasn't one of them, but he said, if in doubt, go to the book and find what you need there. And so, and I'm happy to say they've done it proud. They really did it. They delivered on that promise. And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Yeah, well, actually, it's great to hear that, Steve, because, what I've heard many times is writers always complaining when, their book is taken to a screenwriter. The screenwriter writes what she or he their interpretation of the work. It's aired on a streaming series, and the original author is going, what?
Yeah.
That's my book?
Yeah.
But that clearly hasn't happened here.
It hasn't happened here, and I do understand that can happen, and I was fully prepared for that to be the case. In fact, my son Ross said, well, don't worry, no writer's ever liked anything that anybody did with their book. And I get that, because I had my vision,
Yeah.
and it's in the book, and it's still there, as it always has been. But this is their vision of what that is. And I think it's a little bit like any reader brings to a story something of himself. And what he takes away from that story is what he brought there.
Yeah.
You know, and if it happens to hit some aspect of your personality or your character that resonates, then that begins to take on meaning for you in that context of whatever that you're looking for. But I'm often told by people who've read my book, did you do that on purpose? Well, no, because I don't do anything on purpose. I don't have I don't start with a message I need to get across. It doesn't work like that for me, and I think for a very good reason. But it worked like that for him, because he had something he needed to hear, and it was in the book.
Yeah. Well, again, Rise of the Merlin is being aired on the Daily Wire. And of course, and I've been following this, there are those who have been critical of the Daily Wire generally because of their conservative political orientation. And yet people who are engaging Rise of the Merlin are surprised in a positive way. In fact, I was thinking, I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast a week ago, and Roger Avery, the screenwriter of Pulp Fiction, in fact, he won an Academy Award for his screenwriting, tells a story, or at least told Joe Rogan, that he had heard about Rise of the Merlin, wasn't sure what it was, saw that it was on the Daily Wire, and decided, okay, I'm going to watch the first episode, and I know I'm going to hate it.
That's right.
Because it's going to be somehow politicized and whatever.
Yeah, as a propaganda piece.
And so he watched episode 1, and as he said to Joe Rogan, I was taken aback. He said, beautifully filmed, well acted, powerful story. And he said, really? Well, maybe I'll come back and just see if it holds. Well, he came back to episode 2, episode 3, and I think he said episode 4, and he said he loves it. It's great. Yeah. So, again, kudos to those who directed and produced it, filmed it, acted it, but it has to be a deep satisfaction for you to have such a quality piece emanating from something you wrote.
Yeah, well, satisfaction and relief, because, as others have testified, it can easily go the other way. With any written project like that, because the transferring a story to a film is so different, because the mechanics are different, and they have to tell a story in a different way and show it, in a different way, and it's so different in imagining a setting and actually having to represent that you can see where that enterprise could fail at any number of levels, And so, yes, I am relieved and gratified and in admiration of what they've accomplished. Yeah.
Well, let's see now. I think I said this at the top of the podcast, some 40 books, sales between 2 to 3 million, and obviously your works have been translated, published around the world. And now we have Rise of the Merlin. But I have to tell you, Steve, probably the book that actually for me was the most emotional read was actually a children's book that not many people are aware of, and it's the book Brown Ears. I remember when you wrote it, and you gave us a copy. We read it to our 2 sons, and I remember when Judy and I were reading it to our boys, we're crying. And I guess you're not supposed to do that in a children's book, but it's a very, very powerful story. And I still think to this day, and especially now with Rise of the Merlin, I always thought Brown Ears would have been a great animated series, a great animated character. But for those watching the podcast, what's Brown Ears all about?
Well, for those watching podcasts, the rights are available, and if anybody wants to have a go, talk to my agent. You'd say it's full of emotion because it was a very emotional scene that gave rise to that. And I'll probably break down here too, but it was when our firstborn son was born, his aunt gave him a handmade cloth rabbit. She had made it and stitched it together and put it all together and made little clothes for it. And he had that in his crib, growing up with it. Well, he got to be about 4 years old or so, and we had been on one of our trips, and Ross, of course, would always. I named him. He would carry it with him.
Yeah.
Wherever we went, it was always part of the family, and so his name was Bunny, and. He would take Bunny with him, and that was, we're going someplace. Okay, where's Bunny? Give it to him. Put him in the car seat, and here's your rabbit, and everything was okay then. Anyway, we got home, and Bunny was missing. Didn't know where it was. Looked all over the place, and we thought he must have got left on a bus or something, like to the airport or coming back or someplace. Who knows? It's gone. And so we had a lot of tears over the fact that Bunny's never coming back and everything. And he kind of got over it. A few months passed, and he got over it, or so we thought, because one night, and this is after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, we hear him in his room, this little kid, 4 or 5 years old, in there, opening cupboards and closing and pulling out drawers and things, thumping around in his bedroom and say, "What is going on in there?" We go in, and he said, "I had a dream, Bunny's come back. I have to find him." I thought, oh man. That's, well, the emotion of that was such that I said, well, what if we had a story about when Bunny goes missing, his side of the story, and what happens after that? So I started writing this thing. It gets closer and closer to Christmas. I said, I'm going to give it to him for Christmas. And my wife, God bless her, said, there's no time. Right up into Christmas Eve, there's no time. We've got guests coming in, 2 hours, we've got all this to do and everything. I said, but I'm so close to finishing this. We could get it, for him for Christmas. And she said, okay, give it to me. She read a few pages and says, okay, you finish it. I'll go finish up everything else. And so I did. Yeah. And so we got it. And back in those days, you had a printer that printed it all up and printed it up and stapled it together, put a little ribbon on it. And I did a little drawing of the rabbit in the front and gave it to him for Christmas. And then he couldn't read it, but so we read it to him Christmas Day. He said, nothing. Epic fail. He said nothing, just completely dead emotion and everything. But, day later we go to Grandma's house for Christmas, and we said, okay, you can't take your toys, but you can choose one thing to have with you in the car. And Ross chose that. So, like a lot of things, those don't sit around in our house very long before they get submitted to some publisher. But luckily, no. At the time, I think one of the editors heard about it and said, let's have a look at it. We have a children's book on. We can do that. So they did. Yeah. But then they obviously wanted more, so that became the next one. Was Brown gets lost again because that's his want, and ends up in the ocean off a Scottish beach, and has to live for a while with the sea creatures until he gets rescued again. So,
well, all I can say is someone needs to pick that up.
Well, they do. I think it would be delightful. Yeah. But that's me.
Steve-O, we're running out of time, but I do have several quick questions to ask. First of all, looking at all your work, all of the characters you've introduced to readers around the world, do you have a favorite Lawhead book or a favorite character?
As we say in England, horses for courses. It depends on my feeling at the moment and but no, they all have their place, and they're all like children. I love them all. But then, like children, you raise them and you release them to the world, and then you move on. But I think I remember most fondly the books that just kind of came to me of a piece, or that were just a joy to write. And I'm thinking of books like, well, Byzantium was like that. Patrick was like that. Bright Empires, the whole series was like that, which is a joy to write because it was just operating in kind of my, as they say, wheelhouse, and just letting the thing flow, and it flowed out of itself. And I was just kind of hanging on and not trying, and like I say, not getting in the way of it. And books like that, Scarlet was like that, and so many have come to me. Others, kind of fight you, to get where they need to go, like I say, learn to try to stay out of that, stay out of the way of it over the years. But yeah, so Merlin is special. Scarlet, William Scatlock in the Scarlet book is special. Patrick, I have a great affinity for, and most of the characters in Bright Empires are. That was kind of a labor of love for all of the history and the fantasy and the kind of weird and wacky science that I appreciate. It talks about in Bright Empires the avenue of transport are ley lines, but those are real. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know about them, but they're a real thing. It's telluric energy through the earth, and you can link these things up in lines. And I think in Neolithic people could recognize them, and they use them as the old straight track. That's where the roads went, and they followed those lines. Mm-hmm. And so they're mapped all over. There's a fellow who mapped them all over England, and you can buy the book and read about it. I thought, okay, that's great. Use that as a transport mechanism for this thing. And so, but I was able to visit a lot of the places in those books that we had actually been to, and Istanbul and Prague and all the different places that are featured in the book, and to write about that, and some of the history that comes into it is authentic, but just to have free reign to roam at will, and that's what that's about. And like I say, it was a joy to write, as some of them are, yeah.
So when you're not writing and not cutting the grass, what are you reading these days?
Well, I tend not to read in the genres that I'm working in. I tend to read, at the moment I've got, there's a series that the Thursday Murder Club is big. And I like them just because they're gentle, but they're also very, very well observed, very, very well written. Yeah. They have a good heart.
Yeah, they're very good.
And so I like that. And so that kind of thing. There are other books I've read, current things like The North Woods or the book James, those kind of things. And usually it's things that people pass on to me. Usually Alice will pass me, say, you got to read this book, this is really good. And so I'll take her word for it and take that up, yeah.
Right. Well, Steve, I think we're running out of time, but last question. Any last comments on why I'm such a great friend?
Well, I think the thing that attracted you to you, Harold, was your immense humility and your generosity. I mean, most people would have said, "Oh no, we can't take that cake," but you and your
I love you, man. It is so good.
Took the cake.
Yeah, it's so good having you here. You and Alice have blessed our lives. Well, all of these years.
And back at
you. We have coveted your prayers. You're walking with us through the highs and lows of life.
Well,
so grateful that our podcast audience can get to know you and hopefully read your books and watch Rise of the Merlin. Thank you so very much. Again, this is Harold Smith, the interim president of Lakelight, saying thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.